Hello, friends, and welcome back to English with Jack. My goal here is simple: to help you speak with confidence and understand the real rhythm of the language. Today, we have a rather dramatic story featuring the idiom "cry over spilled milk." By following the events in this tale, you will improve your listening skills and learn how to describe unfortunate situations without losing hope. Felix lived in a small flat above a newsagent in the centre of Bristol. It was a grey, rainy Tuesday morning, the kind of weather that makes you want to stay in bed with a cup of tea. However, Felix could not sleep. Today was the most important day of his career. He was the head baker at the Golden Crumb, a popular artisanal bakery, and today he had to deliver a 3-tiered wedding cake for the mayor's daughter. He checked his mobile phone to see the time, realized he was running late, and quickly dressed. He ran down the stairs, stepped onto the wet pavement, and hurried towards the bakery. The streetlights were still on, reflecting in the puddles on the road. When Felix arrived at the bakery, the air was already thick with the smell of warm yeast and sweet vanilla. His business partner, Fiona, was already there. She was organizing the display cabinet, placing croissants and pain au chocolat in neat rows. She looked up and smiled nervously. She told Felix that everything was ready for the final assembly of the cake. The sponge layers were baked, the jam was prepared, and the buttercream was chilling in the large industrial fridge. Felix washed his hands and put on his white apron. He felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach. This cake had to be perfect. If they made a mistake, it would ruin their reputation in the town. Felix opened the heavy fridge door. He needed to move the large bowl of chilled buttercream to the mixing station to whip it one last time. It was incredibly heavy. He gripped the cold metal bowl with both hands and turned around. Suddenly, his foot slipped on a patch of flour that had been spilled on the floor earlier that morning. Felix tried to regain his balance, but it was too late. The heavy bowl flew out of his hands. It hit the ground with a loud crash, and 5 kilos of expensive prepared buttercream exploded across the bakery floor. Felix stood in silence, staring at the disaster at his feet. Felix put his head in his hands and groaned. He began to list all the reasons why this was a catastrophe. He mentioned the cost of the ingredients, the time it would take to clean, and the disappointment of the mayor. He felt completely defeated. He was ready to give up and call the client to cancel the order. He paced back and forth in the small kitchen, his shoes making sticky sounds on the floor. He was wasting valuable minutes panicking about an accident that had already happened. Fiona, on the other hand, grabbed a mop and a bucket from the cupboard. She looked at Felix with a stern expression. She told him clearly that there was no point crying over spilled milk. The accident had happened, and no amount of regret would put the buttercream back in the bowl. They needed a solution, not an apology. Her words snapped Felix out of his trance. She was right. He took a deep breath and assessed the situation. They had enough icing sugar and vanilla, but they had absolutely no butter left in the stockroom. The delivery lorry was not due until Thursday. Felix checked his watch. It was 7:30 in the morning. The large supermarket down the high street had just opened. He untied his apron, threw it on a chair, and grabbed his coat. He told Fiona to clean the floor while he went to buy every block of butter he could find. Felix ran out of the bakery and sprinted down the pavement. It was still raining, and he had to dodge commuters who were queuing for the bus. He did not take his car because the morning traffic in the city centre was gridlocked. Running was faster. When he burst into the supermarket, he looked a bit mad. He was breathless and had white flour on his nose. He grabbed a trolley and ran to the dairy aisle. He loaded 30 packs of unsalted butter into the trolley, ignoring the strange looks from the other shoppers. He paid as quickly as possible and lugged the heavy bags back towards the bakery. His arms ached, but he knew they still had a chance to save the day. By the time Felix returned to the Golden Crumb, his clothes were soaked with rain, but his determination was stronger than ever. Fiona had done an excellent job. The flour was spotless, and the mixing bowl had been washed and dried. Without saying a word, they fell into a perfect rhythm. Felix chopped the butter into cubes, while Fiona measured the sugar. They threw everything into the mixer and watched anxiously as the machine whirred to life. Slowly, the yellow lumps transformed into a smooth, pale cream. It was perfect. They filled the piping bags and began the delicate work of decorating the tiers. The next 2 hours passed in a blur of concentration. Felix's hands were steady as he piped intricate rose designs onto the sides of the sponge. Fiona carefully stacked the layers, ensuring the structure was stable. Just as Felix placed the final sugar flour on top of the cake, the doorbell rang. It was the delivery driver. They carefully packed the cake into a large protective box and carried it out to the van. As the vehicle drove away down the wet road, Felix leaned against the doorframe and let out a long sigh of relief. He was absolutely shattered, but the job was done. Later that afternoon, they received a text message from the mayor's assistant. The message said the cake was a masterpiece and tasted divine. Felix made 2 cups of tea and sat down opposite Fiona. He thanked her for keeping a cool head when he had panicked. He realized now that if he had continued to complain about the accident, they never would have finished in time. It was a valuable lesson. Sometimes things go wrong, but focusing on the solution is far more effective than regretting the mistake. That brings us to the end of our story for today. I hope you enjoyed following Felix and Fiona on their stressful baking adventure. It was a close call, but they managed to save the wedding cake in the end. Did you notice how we used the idiom "cry over spilt milk" to describe the act of dwelling on a past mistake? We also used British vocabulary like flat, pavement, and lorry. If you found this lesson helpful, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel for more stories. It really helps me create more content for you. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.